this video we're going to talk about the initial configuration steps of a Juniper device. What do I mean by this? Well, basically imagine you just took the device out of the box, you put it in the rack, power it on. So how does it look like? What do you have to do before you can actually put it in production? And imagine that if that device is in production for a year or 2 years and you want to reuse it somewhere else, what do you actually have to do to get it back to factory default settings? So let's see it on the actual router. So here I have this router. This router doesn't have any configuration. So the first thing we can do is log as the root user. The root user, as we have spoken before, is a default user that comes with the device and doesn't have any password. So when I type root, it doesn't even ask me for the password. It will just log me automatically. And another interesting thing to remember is that with root users, we don't go into the Junos CLI. We go directly into the shell of the Unix system. And if we want to go to the CLI, as we do now, we will use the CLI command. So here we are. We type CLI. We are now in the Junos CLI. So let's see what configuration this device has. So this device doesn't have any configuration. It only has the default configuration for syslog. But it has an interesting message here. So the message we're getting here is that we're missing a mandatory statement. We're missing the mandatory statement root authentication. So that statement basically means that our root user doesn't have any password. So what if you don't want to put any password to the root user? You basically, before you can actually put any configuration into the device, let's go into configuration mode, you'll need to set that password, or else the system won't let you commit because you are missing a key statement. So let's say that, for example, here, the first thing I want to do is enable SSH or telnet. I should also configure some management interfaces, but for simplicity's sake, let's say that I want to enable SSH. So we do system services SSH. I can now do a show compare. It's telling me that, yeah, you're enabling SSH. So if I try to do a commit, let's see what happens. I want to basically apply that configuration. So I do a commit and immediately it tells me that the same message, you are missing a mandatory statement root authentication. So commit failed because we are missing a statement. So again, before you can add any configuration to the device, and I mean any, you can see as something as simple as enabling SSH, or if you want to enable anything else, before you can actually do a commit, in order for the commit to succeed, you're going to have to add that statement into the configuration. So let's do that. Let's add the root password. So if we use a context-sensitive help, we can see that we can add the password already encrypted. We can add the password in plain text, which is what we're going to do, or we can add an SSH key. So let's say we do plain text password, and let's say we want our password to be quite simple. Let's say A, for example. So I go A, and it immediately tells me the minimum password length is 6. So basically we have a protection, and it also tells me that the password should require change of case, digits, or punctuation. So what it's telling me here is by default it has password policy. So it's telling me that in order to keep our device safe, we need the password, the root password, to be at least 6 characters, and to have some mix of change of case or digits or punctuation. So it's an inherent protection of the system to minimize the risk of your device having a simple or guessable password. For example, like 1, 2, 3. So let's set the password. I'm going to set 1 to 6 and I don't know, a dot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dot. It's going to ask us to retype the password to make sure that we did it correctly and we didn't made a mistake. So let's do it again. And now it didn't give me any message, which means that it succeeded. And if I do show compare again, I can actually see it now. The interesting thing is that even though I put the password in clear text, it's going to be ciphered by the Junos. So basically that's my 1, 2, 3 dot that's probably an MD5 hash. So now if I do commit, it should be okay and should be succeed normally. So it's telling me commit complete. So now if I do show, I can actually see the configuration, and I can see that now it's not giving me the warning message that we saw before. It's telling me that the root authentication info is there, and it's telling me that the SSH service is enabled. So basically I managed to succeed with my configuration in this particular device. So from this point on, you can actually add any configuration that you want to the device. So you can add more users, you can add your interfaces, your routing policies, firewall filters. You can work with the device normally. That's the only requirement that it's put in place. Before you can do any change, you need to set a password for the root user, and that password needs to follow that password policy, which in any corporate environment, in any enterprise environment, should be quite normal and should be quite sensitive to have password more than 6 characters with some mix of uppercase numbers and punctuation. So let's say now you have your device, you did some configuration, it's in service, let's say it's in a branch office or something of that nature, and now you want to reuse it for another purpose. So you bring back the device to HQ and you want to remove that configuration and basically put it in the same state that it was when you took it out of the box. So how can we do that? Well, we can do that. You could do that in several ways. You could do that by going delete everything you have on the device, but that typically is going to be quite a tedious task, and it's also very error prone. So we could do it in a much simpler way using the load command. So if we use load, we use a context sensitive help. We can see, besides the several options that already come with load, such as merge, override, we saw on another video, we can actually see there's a special option called factory default, which is telling us that it will override existing configuration with a factory default. So basically, it doesn't matter what the device has, it will wipe it out. So before I do that, I'm going to enable a couple more things so it's more visible. So let's say we want to enable system services, finger, and FTP, and what else? Netconf, I'm missing stuff here. So show compare. So now we have more stuff there, so let's do commit first. So now my configuration has a little bit more, so it's more visible. Okay, so we go to load and we do, load factory default. It will give me a little warning saying, oh, I activated the factory configuration, which basically means that it wiped out our configuration. Remember, the same Junos configuration model applies here, which means that the device still hasn't been changed. You have to do a commit first, and you can actually see the difference doing show compare. So let's do a show compare. We see in the show compare that there is now no root password, because again we went to factory default, and in factory default the root user doesn't have any password. And since the only difference between our configuration and the default configuration was at the couple of services I just enabled, we can see that they are now going to be removed. So let's try to do a commit and see what happens. So we try to do a commit and we see that we're getting the same message, that we're missing the mandatory statement, which basically is we're missing the root password. So look here, we are experiencing the same behavior. Even though we're loading the defaults, the system, before we can actually do that, it's going to force us to put the root password again to make sure we don't have a device without a root password. So before we can actually do this, we have to set a root password. So let's do that. Let's do set system root authentication, plain text password, and let's put another password that complies with the policies. I'm just going to put the exact same password. It's not required. You could put whatever password you want that complies with the policies, but let's do a show compare now. As you can see now, it's going to tell me that it's going to remove my old one and put this new one I just entered, and it's also going to remove the services, which is the difference between the our default configuration and the configuration that was in this device. So if we do a commit, it should be completely normal, completely fine. And basically this is a very quick and easy way of having a device that you want to repurpose or something, or perhaps imagine that you want to sell it, or you want to donate it or something like that, and you want to wipe your configuration. This is one way of doing it, and it's very quick, it's very easy. Remember, if you have a production device that has 100 commands, you have to go manually one by one, so they give us this functionality. So to sum up, we saw a little bit how a Juniper device appears out of the box, what we actually have to do to put it in production, and if that device is in production for some time and we want to bring it back to that factory default state, what command we have to use and what's the requirement and what we have to do to actually make that successful and make it be in that same state. Thank you.